Recording. Thanks, Tori. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining our December coffee hour. We are very excited to have Brian Hess from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. He's a wildlife biologist, and he will be talking this morning about the recently updated State Wildlife Action Plan. So very excited to hear all about it. Before he starts sharing, Jim from our team at Sustainable CT is going to make a couple announcements.
Howdy, folks. Thanks for being here. Wonderful. This coffee hour is being recorded for those who couldn't be here and for those who are here and would like to review anything we covered today. You will be able to find this and all of our coffee hours, along with the recordings of workshops, certification help, newsletter previews, and a great deal more on our YouTube channel. Search YouTube for Sustainable CT and you'll find us right there. And we'll also put the link in the chat. Thank you, Torrent. While you're there, be sure to check out this month's episode of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. New episodes are available on the 15th of each month on YouTube at sustainablect.org or wherever you get your podcast. This month, we have an excellent conversation with, why, yes, our friend Brian Hess, who we'll be speaking with today. It is an in-depth conversation about his career and the Wildlife Action Plan. A fun conversation, too. Brian was a great guest, and we're sure you'll find it enjoyable and informative, so do check that out. And we want to remind everyone that we are currently in the middle of our annual appeal, the Campaign for a Sustainable CT. It's going on right now through the end of the year. For the people in your life who appreciate a truly meaningful gift, consider making a donation in their names to our campaign. You can make a gift on behalf of anyone you like, a friend, a family member, a coworker, even a pet, which is what I did. Please support Sustainable CT in fostering a connected, inclusive, and sustainable Connecticut with a donation today. Just follow the link in the chat to contribute or visit Sustainable CT, click on the Support Us button at the top of the page. And in case you needed more incentive, this year you'll have a chance to win either a Half Dome 2 tent, courtesy of REI Norwalk, or an Electra Ponto Go e-bike, courtesy of Mystic Cycle Center, which is very cool. A donation is not required to enter the drawing, but we do hope you'll contribute even a small amount because every dollar counts in doing what we do and even being able to bring you forums like this one. And of course, we want to wish you and yours a joyous, fulfilling, and sustainable holiday season for sure. Okay, now that we have all that out of the way, Kate, take it away.
Well, I'll just pass it right over to Brian. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. All right. Is that presentation showing up?
Yes, looks great. Oh,
Wonderful.
it just
Um,
vanished, actually. Sorry.
Pardon?
It just vanished.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
all right. Let me try that again.
Yep, back.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you all thank you both for the opportunity to be here and to talk to this group. Thanks for the warm welcome, and for the multiple forums to talk about our Wildlife Action Plan. Um, a little bit about myself, real quick. Again, my name is Brian Hess. I work with the CT Deep Wildlife Division. I supervise what's called the Wildlife Diversity Program. So we're kind of in charge of the breadth of biodiversity in the state, and we do projects for everything from invertebrates like pollinators and freshwater mussels, all the way up through bats and shrews, turtles and snakes. Basically, if you can't hunt or fish for it, it's probably falling. It's something that we're interested in. Um, the other kind of like up to the last minute news here is as of last Wednesday, so as of the 10th of December, our action plan is official. It has been approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and um, they actually did a really great job considering the shutdown, getting that approval turned around. So uh, we're pretty excited about that. All right. So I want to try to get through a lot of stuff today. I want to go over a little bit of the Wildlife Action Plan basics, some tools that we've created for implementation here that kind of go along with our Wildlife Action Plan, and then some try to fit that into the broader context, like what can municipalities, what can different groups of folks do to sort of not only help implement the plan, but to get benefit out of it. All right, there we go. So I guess I want to first of all say that all of this kind of none of this work happens in a vacuum. There is a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life and a lot of different organizations that are working on these sorts of things. Um, in my field, it can kind of be really easy to give into that sort of doom and gloom feel. There's always, it feels like no shortage of bad news about um, biodiversity, but getting to talk to groups like this, getting to interact with other people who care about this, uh, I've found like one of the sort of like the best parts of working on this wildlife action plan over the past couple years, um, because it really does kind of confirm that there's a lot of people working at a lot of levels. So partnerships are really important for getting this work done. There are, obviously, we can kind of zoom all the way out and look at um, conservation design across like the continent, and then zoom down a little bit and look at like landscapes and how needs for specific landscapes within regions. Um, Wildlife action plans kind of fit in there as well at that state level. And then, but all of that stuff has to happen on the ground. Like it can't just happen sort of in a theoretical space. So there's really important jobs for everyone to do in this link or in this chain of scale. So I guess all that to say is working with partners like Sustainable CT and with you all has been a really um, rewarding part of this revision. So I want to go through a little bit of Wildlife Action Plan history before we dig into some of the other stuff. We did a little bit of research or some partner surveys before we started our action plan revision this time in 2025, and we did find that about half of the people that we talked to weren't aware of the Wildlife Action Plan at all. So a little bit of background about it. In Connecticut, we actually started our non-harvested wildlife program, which has now become the Wildlife Diversity Program, which I supervise. That program it was enacted in a state statute in 1986, and this is following sort of a lot of the a lot of federal legislation and environmental regulation that happened during like the 70s. So the EPA, the First Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, things like that, got a lot of folks thinking about the importance of working and spending time on not just species that we hunt or fish for those resources, but like basically all wildlife species. Um, Funding it has always been a tricky challenge, though. Um, and one of the solutions to that was Congress created the Federal, State, and Tribal Wildlife Grant Program in 2001. And that was a grant, an allocation that went to states that allowed them to spend money on things that they were previously not allowed to spend money on based on previous grant sources. So all of our work on invertebrates, reptiles, and amphibians, anything that doesn't have fur or feathers comes from state and tribal wildlife grants. That's really the only game in town when it comes to paying for that work, at the state level at least. Connecticut is a minimum allocation state, so it's not a huge amount of money. I'll also say that because it's an annual appropriation, we don't it's something that has to be constantly fought for in the appropriation process. And uh, the level of funding has not really kept pace with inflation too. So there have been some challenges with that funding source. But that aside, one of the parts of that funding source when that was enacted was to create state wildlife action plans. These are kind of the blueprint for how to spend that money, what to do with it, and how to sort of conserve biodiversity within states. So we had our first round of state wildlife action plans in 2005. Those were revised in 2015, and then again, we revised ours in 2025 as well. The goals of all of this is to keep species from getting listed in the first place. That was a really compelling argument, and it continues to be a really compelling argument, is that if you do the work on some of these vulnerable, these declining species before they need state listing or federal listing, um, you can save yourself a lot of headache and do a lot of really good work. So recover listed species, prevent listings, have healthy populations of common species. I'll also mention too, wildlife action plans through the years have become the underpinning of other proposals that have come around. So I don't know if you all recall a couple years ago, Recovering America's Wildlife Act was a funding mechanism that almost got through. It didn't quite make it over the finish line, but wildlife action plans were kind of the basis of that as well. All state wildlife action plans have 8 elements, and these again are mandated by Congress. All of them need to describe species of greatest conservation need, or SGCN. So I try not to use acronyms, but if you see SGCN, that's what that means. They're species that are native species that are vulnerable or declining and would benefit from conservation help. Key habitats, threats and issues, and then actions. That's kind of the meat of the plan. How to monitor the plan, the revision schedule. So we are required to revise the plan at least every 10 years, but if we plan on revising it sooner or later, that would go in that section. Review by other agencies and tribal governments, and then partner and public review as well. So one of the great things about wildlife action plans is that all states have to do this, and all states have to follow that same formula. So there is some consistency across the nation when you look at wildlife action plans. Some of the highlights of our 2025 plan. We have 573 species of greatest conservation need listed. I've got a little table there showing exactly how all of the different taxonomic groups fall out. This time around, one of the things that we do in part of developing the plan is to assemble groups of taxonomic experts. These represent non-governmental organizations, academics, and then also agency biologists who have a particular expertise in a taxonomic group. We had 6 taxa teams, and they were given quite a bit of, they were assigned with the job of assembling the evidence and the lists of species of greatest conservation need. Additionally, there's 515 what we're calling state assessment priority species. Those are species for which we don't have enough information to make a really great assessment as to their status. Essentially, these are data deficient. More info is needed. All of that information, by the way, you can find in our wildlife action plan. I'm going to skip through some of the highlights here. I'll also mention some of our highest priority statewide actions. So we came up with these by looking through those species and seeing what are the actions that would benefit them. So the top action is research and monitoring. There's a lot that we just don't know about where things are and how much of them there are. So research and monitoring is number 1. Number 2 was designing and planning conservation. So how do you go about protecting what you do have? This habitat acquisition, so this is actual, protection of habitat. This kind of falls into this category as well. And then finally, direct habitat management. How do you help it? How do you improve the conditions under which that species is trying to survive and succeed? I'm not going to read through all of this, but just to say, one of the great things about the Wildlife Action Plan revision is that we were able to go through and sort of revisit and look at progress that we've made since 2015. So I was on the bird taxa team, and we looked through all of the actions in the 2015 plan that pertained to birds and decided, here are things that we've actually made progress on. So there's been a whole lot of actions from 2015. Where there's been some really great progress. So now I want to talk a little bit about a couple of. I'm hopeful that there's a little bit of background about wildlife action plans. I see a question in the chat was clarifying how species of greatest conservation need interacts with endangered species under the Connecticut's ESA. Great question, and I totally agree that we have too many lists of things and it's confusing. So. Connecticut's Endangered Species Act, those species are part of our environmental review process. They have like sort of a regulatory bit to them as well. And those species specifically are chosen, by a methodology put forth in regulations. Species of greatest conservation need and this Wildlife Action Plan are non-regulatory only. They're a bit more inclusive, so there's more species in our SGCN list than there are in Connecticut's Endangered Species Act list, because we're not looking just at species that are threatened, endangered, or special concern, but also species that, might be vulnerable to declining, but are still, but have not reached those other points yet. Great. I got a thumbs up, so I'm assuming that I answered that question. I wanted to go over a couple of implementation tools that we are working on to help implement the Wildlife Action Plan now that we've got it. So a couple of those I'll really quickly talk about our conservation opportunity areas and our state's conservation action tracker. So conservation opportunity areas were developed in partnership with the University of Connecticut. As PhD candidate, Katie Bischoff is basically the primary person working on that, and she is working under Chad Rittenhouse at UConn. What they do, they assemble ecological data as well as town data and social data to create different spatial maps to target different sets of conservation actions. And they do that about, there's 7 different maps. You can see protect, connect, restore, manage, partner, inform, and then research and monitor. So I'm I'm not as familiar with all of this stuff as Katie is, but I'll try to do my best to discuss it. First thing assembled was ecological data. The taxonomic expert teams that participated in the swap suggested some ambassador species. These are species that represent some kind of imperiled habitat or some sort of unique biology or ecology, but also had enough data that we could actually put them into a habitat or a species distribution model. Again, they removed the species that had less than 10 occurrences before 2016, and then developed habitat suitability models for each of those ambassador species. Here are the 14 species that are sort of got put into into that ecological data section. So there's a few birds, a few mammals, a few fish, herps, and invertebrates. Next, we added key habitat maps. So these are the maps of the habitats in Connecticut. We also looked at NDDB, that's the Natural Diversity Database, the Connecticut Endangered Species Review Areas, as well as protected areas. So these are areas that are already in permanent conservation. We also included town data. So one of the things that Katie did was look through plans of conservation and development that were published since the last State Wildlife Action Plan, and identified towns that have plans that have topics that overlap with the Wildlife Action Plan. So not only looking at the timing of when towns are revising their plans, but which plans mentioned wildlife, which mentioned things like habitat and natural resources. We also looked at where engagement resources were, things like libraries. We looked at other partners' maps like important bird areas, and I think there was a Nature Conservancy map about resilient landscapes that went in there as well. And then also some information about population density. All of that stuff was put into a software called Zonation, and that ranks sort of the priority of different actions based on a set of weights that you can define. And then we would take like a certain percentage of those areas, and that would sort of end up being those conservation opportunity areas. So a couple of ones I'll just go through because they might be interesting to the folks on this call. This is the protect conservation opportunity areas. Some of the things that are in there are the habitat suitability models as well as the seven key habitats. All of those are in there, and then what happened was we took out areas that are already protected. So obviously we're not going to target protecting areas that are already in permanent conservation protection. So these are areas that are not currently in permanent protection that also have that high suitability. Here is another one called the Connect Conservation Opportunity Area. This one's a little bit more aimed at connecting existing protected areas. So in addition to the two weighted things from the first COA, you can see that this one also includes distance to protected areas and information about the TNC resilient and connected network. So that shows how habitats networked with one another. So I noticed there's a question in the chat about accessing COAs. Links to the layers and information, we're working on making them available. Currently, we have all of this in a story map that you can get to through our Wildlife Action Plan website. The map layers that are in that story map are not currently, like, you can't zoom in and zoom out and manipulate them just yet. We will make those the GIS data available for these both on the CT Deep GIS Open Data website and then also at CT Eco. Another thing that CT Eco has offered to host for us are Katie has made specific maps for each town and also each regional cog that could be that you can access. All of these are not available yet. We're still working on figuring out getting all of that hosting aligned, but they will be available in the near future. If you want the data at this point, you can email Katie. I put her email there, and I will also drop that into the chat at the end. All right, so that's the conservation opportunity areas. So that's sort of targeting actions. And the other thing that we thought would be a really important thing to do is to understand where things are already taking place. So understanding that people are already doing the work out there. And that's one of the motivating reasons behind developing a conservation action tracker. We did this, we actually ripped off, Maine developed one of these following their 2015 Wildlife Action Plan revision. So I think they went live with theirs in 2017, a conservation action tracker. So we were actually able to ride the state of Maine's coattails a little bit and develop this pretty inexpensively by essentially working with the developer who worked on theirs to reskin Maine's action tracker with Connecticut stuff on top of it. But I think you'll see it works out well. The action tracker essentially consists of a dashboard. This is kind of the landing page for the action tracker, and then also a publicly available map. So the conservation tracker is a self-service portal for conservation partners to help map work. Some of the goals of the potential benefits would be to help agencies and partners be aware of what's going on. So if you're, if you're in a town, you can sort of look and see what kind of actions are taking place in your neighborhood. It allows conservation partners to publicize their work. You can actually put contact info and links into the projects. It can facilitate collaboration between organizations because you're able to see who is doing similar work, who might be working on similar issues, and then also help the public get involved with local groups. So I get calls all the time for, hey, we want to volunteer and do something. And I don't always have like something ready to go that people can just jump in on. But one of the things that I'm hoping is that we're going to be able to point people to the Conservation Action Tracker and say, hey, why don't you like look in your neighborhood and see who is doing what? And what could be, if they'd be interested in taking on volunteers, or if you can, become a member of your local land trust or something like that. So I did want to do a quick implementation tools demonstration. And to do that, I am going to stop presenting momentarily. All right, can everyone see my browser screen right here?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So I am going to drop this link, this link in the chat. This is the link to our Wildlife Action Plan website. Essentially, most of the things that we will talk to about today, you can get through there. Also, if you want to just go to a search engine and type in Connecticut Wildlife Action Plan, this should be the first thing that pops up. So a couple of things as you go into the site. Conservation opportunities and actions, that's where the conservation opportunity areas live. That's where the Conservation Action Tracker lives. We have the actual 2025 Wildlife Action Plan. And then we have, this is information about the species of greatest conservation need. Real quick, I'll go to the Wildlife Action Plan real quick. Currently, it exists in the form of a bunch of PDFs that you can download. You can also download all of the appendices as well here. There is a link up here at the top where you can download the entire plan and the appendices, and have them in a separate zipped folder. We are working currently on taking the Wildlife Action Plan and putting it on and sort of implementing it as a web-based version. So right now we've got the web-based version of Chapter 1 up. So Chapter 1 is all about species of greatest conservation need. So what's on the web is actually it's a little bit of an abridged version of what's in the PDF. So there's a summary, some info, and some tables. You can click on next section here at the bottom or go back to the home page. And there's also links to the PDF of the chapter as well. A little bit of information about what SGCN and SAPS are and sort of how they fall out. And then additionally, we've got overviews of each of the 6 taxonomic groups. So here's a little bit of a summary of amphibians and reptiles in Connecticut, a little bit of a summary of birds, fish, invertebrates, mammals, and finally plants. So the intent is each of the chapters will have a similar navigational structure. We are still working on putting all of that together, but we're on our way. So that's, I guess, how to get to the actual Wildlife Action Plan itself. Now, a couple of other things. The conservation opportunity areas and conservation action tracker live on that left-handed box right there. Conservation opportunity areas currently, if you click on that button, it will take you to a story map that sort of gives you an overview of the different conservation opportunity areas. You can see all of the areas, but when you click on them, you'll see it's not like a zoomable map, a layer or anything like that yet. It's still just an image. So, all right. So finally, the Conservation Action Tracker. Um, if you click on that, it'll take you to ctactions.org. And a little bit of I was going to demonstrate how to go about putting in a project. So I'm going to click on Explore Projects, and that'll take me to the map page. And allow that to load. It takes a second or two. So I had a mind to put in a project that I worked on in 2022 with the Department of Transportation. So I'm going to click Create New Project. You can see you've got this little cursor now that you can select a location. If you want to change that location, you can double click it and then you can drag it around. All right, so project net is going to be peregrine falcon nesting box. There's a whole bunch of different project types that are here. Um, some of them are, most of them I think are self-explanatory, but I also have provided created a user guide for the Wildlife Action Tracker, and that includes definitions and examples for each of these project types. This is direct species management, so we're going to throw that there. Birds, primary SGCN, peregrine falcon. All right, there's no secondary SGCN there. The idea behind this is to make this a really easy and quick form to fill out. The only two things that need to be filled out are the project name and the project type. Everything else is optional information. So primary habitat is going to be developed areas because this is literally on a bridge. And it's not really addressing a conservation issue. I could say transportation and service corridors. All right, this project was completed and started and completed in 2022, and it is complete. The project description is just going to be like real quick description of what happened. So install a uh, this is not a statewide action, so no. So this would be if you had example of when you might use the statewide action thing is if you had I also coordinate the Midwinter Eagle Survey, and we have 150 survey locations statewide at least. Um, Rather than pick out 150 different points and enter a project 150 times, I would probably just put it at my home office, click on my home office where all of the work happens, um, and then mention that it's a statewide action right there. Project scope, this is like if you know how many acres or feet or miles or something like that your project um, takes place. This is not really relevant here. I'm going to put Deep as the organization, myself as the contact name. I'll throw my email address in there, phone number. That way, if people do want to know more about it, it's going to be there. Keep in mind that this is all publicly accessible, so if you don't want information out there, uh, that can be excluded. And then organizational partners, CTDOT. I don't have any additional information or links, so I'm going to click Save, and it'll take some moment. But there should be, yep, project area updated, and now we've got that project into the tracker. And if we go back home, we've just added a second project. Um, So there was a question in the chat, what was used to build the action tracker? So this is actually built on an app in ArcGIS Online. Um, and then a company that we worked with, Timmins, actually helped us to create this sort of login structure where I'm able to create users and allow them to go in and enter and edit data. Um, that's kind of the where that custom feature comes in. There is a guide to what we're looking for in each field, and I have. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick here. All right. So I did make a little user guide here about how to set up an account, log in, navigate the map, create a project, a little bit of information about the different fields, and then also some definitions of what project types and conservation issues are. All right. I'm going to go back real quick to so I want to put this in a little bit of a broader context. There's a lot of people out there doing really fantastic work. And again, one of the things that's been really encouraging for me is to learn about all of that. I think a lot of times we end up working in a silo or in a bubble, and it's often easy to sort of forget about that. Um, so I think one of the things that we're hopeful to do is to learn a little bit more about what else is going on out there, and then work on promoting that work, um, across all of our, using our methodologies, using our outlets, and then have our partners help to promote work as well. So some of the success stories that I've learned about. This is just a few examples. Andover Conservation Commission completed a natural resource inventory. The Norcross Wildlife Foundation protected a bunch of land, sort of on the border of Connecticut and Massachusetts. The Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station completed a inventory of bees in Connecticut. Great Hollow Nature Preserve did a study of artificial light effects on bats, and that's what the picture you can see right here is part of their experimental setup. And then the Aspetuck Land Trust built a Miyawaki forest, a very which is essentially a little tiny pocket um, planting in Bridgeport, I believe. So all of this kind of fits into this bigger context. I wanted to flag in that spirit some of the things that potentially municipal commissions can help work with. These are I pulled from Hank Gruner has been working with us on. He's part of the Andover Conservation Commission and part of the group that completed a natural resource inventory there, and has really been advocating for and helping municipalities uh, get some of that forward momentum there. So one of the actions is to complete a natural resource inventory. And this again doesn't need to be a exhaustive or complete but taking first steps is always a good thing. We're hoping that the Wildlife Action Plan can really serve as a place where a lot of the resources that you might look at, a lot of the references that might be helpful, can kind of exist within a place that's easy to find. So, it could be a starting point for you. Another thing is to promote best management practices and development practices. Again, this is, trying to make sure that when things are happening, we're doing them in the best way that we know how. One of the things that's on my mind is the potential of assembling best management practices in right now they're kind of it's not always easy to know exactly where to go to find best management practices, or sometimes you might find BMPs, certain BMPs that conflict with other ones. So, one of the things that's on my mind is the potential of going out and creating like a little library for BMPs for folks like you. Reviewing land use policies and regulations. Again, this could be like things like mapping and knowing where vernal pools are, reviewing cold water streams or vernal pools as areas of concern, or if you know that you have a sensitive area or a special ecological community to extend those review areas around those sensitive areas. Um, and then the other thing that Hank suggested was to complete an open space analysis. So looking at the amount of land that's protected for conservation, and identifying other places where some acquisition could be helpful. Again, municipalities are just kind of one of the user groups that we're hoping to engage. In the spirit of doing that, we've created some handouts for folks. We currently have 2 of them completed, but we're hopefully going to have a whole bunch more. So priority conservation actions for municipalities and priority conservation actions for everyone. I've shared those with Kate, and she's going to share those with the folks on the call here too. And then I'll just mention the 2 key resources to remind you of as we move forward. Uh, the Wildlife Action Plan website, again, is kind of the key to it all. And then the other thing I'll suggest, and I hadn't mentioned yet, is we have a partner implementation newsletter. And I'm going to, hold on, oops, undo, click on that and drop that in the chat. We have a quarterly newsletter that we've been putting out for about 2 years now. That's one of the places that we're trying to do our best to feature those success stories from other partner organizations, and as well as share the news about what's going on, what's kind of the latest with Wildlife Action Plan updates, implementation, opportunities, that kind of thing. So, for example, when we have updated our website to include more chapters, that's going to go out into the newsletter group. When the conservation opportunity area spatial layers are finally uploaded to our open space, our GIS portal and CT Eco, that stuff's going to go out in the newsletter. So that's kind of the best way to stay in touch with what we're working on and what the folks in this arena are working on. So those are the two key resources. And that's kind of all I had. I am putting my contact info there. You can give me a call or an email at any time. Also, I did put Katie Bischoff's contact info if you have any specific questions about conservation opportunity areas, or want to take a look through some of the files that she's got. I did see one other question in the chat. It was, how does the Wildlife Division and Wildlife Action Plan deal with potential nuisances or negative wildlife interactions that may call for management instead of conservation? For example, how does it help policymakers to develop recommendations or management of bear populations? So, I will say the Wildlife Action Plan really doesn't deal too much with those. It is focused on species of greatest conservation need. So it is a little bit, the plan itself is a little bit limited in terms of, we're focused largely on species that are vulnerable, declining, and would benefit from conservation action. That said, I do think that there's room for things like, outreach, education, uh, community engagement on some of these other sort of broader scale projects to deal with nuisances. The Wildlife Division itself actually has quite a robust program called Bear Aware that helps folks and communities assess and address things that could reduce bear interactions. Um, there are resources in there about stashing and securing your garbage, bird feeding, things like that. So please, if you do have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out. We do have programs that do deal with some of those. Um, I guess you would call them nuisance wildlife management issues as well. So yeah, I guess that's all I had. I don't know. Is there anything that you'd like me to go back to or talk more about or anything like that?
Brian, thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. So much great info. And yeah, kudos on all of the effort into putting that was put into the wildlife plan update. Um, Very
Yeah.
exciting.
I appreciate it. It was honestly, we've been working on this plan. I think we kicked it off in the summer of 2022. So like it's been cooking for a little while. But all of that said, it's been a really great experience. There's been a lot of opportunities to interface with partners like yourselves. Um, and I have learned just an immense amount about some of the really cool stuff that's already going on in Connecticut as a part of this process. So um, it's been a really rewarding experience too.
That's really great to hear. Um, yeah, if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat or come off mute and ask. We have time to have some more discussion. Christine, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, Brian and I talked a little while ago about this, and I'm so happy to see you were able to make the little municipal fact sheets. Those look awesome. I had two more things that popped into my head that I just wanted to mention. So, obviously, you guys put a ton of time and effort into this plan, and one thing I was thinking is that when the GIS data does become fully available, you should definitely host a webinar about it, and then see if you can register it for as many like continuing education credits as possible. So like
Hmm.
certified planners need to get continuing education credits from APA. I think foresters also need to get continuing education credits because I've had webinars before where we would have gotten 7 people normally and we ended up getting 100 because they all needed to get their credits in. So I think that will help spread the word. My other thing that I was thinking about is I was wondering if you can talk to other departments at DEEP that have grants, sorry, not departments, offices or whatever, that have grants for conservation, like the Oswald grant or climate resilience or rec trails, and see if they will consider amending their rubric to give extra points to projects in COAs. Because, like, I know they do that with, like, if it's in an EJ community or if it aligns with the new C&D plan. So that way
Hmm.
you're forcing every town who is applying for that to at least look at the plan and consider it. So those are two suggestions. I don't know how much they'll help with implementation, but I think they will help with exposure.
Yeah, no, and I think that implementation is like it's a million different little things. So all of that stuff absolutely does help. So yeah, thank those are fantastic suggestions. I will say one of the things that we're working on right now within the agency is to sort of switch from the development process to the implementation process. We're one of the things that I want I feel like I harp on it too much, but like I don't want this. This isn't a plan that we have to do every 10 years, but it's a 10-year plan, right? And so, the fact that is that we're just kind of moving into a new phase of it. So, yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things that I'm hopeful to do is to get some folks from, land and water management, within Deep involved, potentially have some of these. I think there's a green plan revision coming up and a forest action plan revision coming up
Yeah.
in the near future, and to get some of the information about COAs and some of the updated wildlife action plan information involved in those plans too.
That's great. I was actually I had been reading the 2020 Forest Action Plan, and it was really interesting because they were saying some things about how trails are really good for wildlife and stuff like that. And then I was reading your plan, and there were actually some species that pointed out that said, interactions with humans from recreational uses actually causes them harm. So I think state plans should talk to each other to
Hmm.
avoid, like conflicting suggestions. But yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christine. We have not a question, but a comment in the chat from Ian that this plan is super timely on the COG front with the new housing bill that recently passed. So they thank you for that. It's always great to see things
Is
overlap in that way.
is there a way that it could be more like there could be some more utility there? I guess one of the things that I'm always looking for feedback on is if there is a suggestion or something that like that I have not thought. I'm a biologist by training, so this is like, uh, um, trying to teach an old dog some new tricks. Uh, and if there's any suggestions or ways that we can package this info, make it better, make it more accessible, I'm all ears for that. So yeah.
Go ahead, Ian.
Yes. So just on that, because with the housing bill, the COGS have to determine developable land in each of our regions
Hmm.
to that for housing. And so I think having the data about the conservation areas and having that GIS data is sort of another layer that we can add to our analysis when we get to that point next year. I think will be really useful because what we hear in our COG a lot, and I'm sure every COG hears this, is sort of that defined balance between conservation and development. Hence why
Hmm.
we have plans called plans of conservation and development. So where can we build housing, but where can we preserve the wildlife is sort of that very fine and very fun balance. So to have this information now, or knowing that like this information is there, so next year it'll be available, will be super helpful when we start the work to determine where where housing would make most sense in each of our cogs. So and where we should preserve open space. So that's just where I'm coming at right now.
Do you, is there like a timeline on when I just want to make sure that we can, if
End
it's
of
like, go ahead.
December 2026. So we have plenty of time.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to get all of the COA data up there, and
Yes.
if we need to put a rush on it or something like
So December of 2026, and each of all the cogs will be working with the Office of Policy and Management (OPM) to develop methodology and metrics and things like that. So there's plenty of time for collaboration between the different the different departments at the state level.
Very good.
Any other questions from anyone on the call? If not, I have one last question for you, Brian. Since you mentioned that you really enjoyed the part of the process getting to see what good work is already being done in the state. Maybe we love to highlight when communities are doing awesome sustainability work. So if there's a couple projects that really stuck with you or that you want to share.
Hmm. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Some of this is like just like uh personal knowledge and not necessarily like information. But I want to say like one of the things was great is we got a lot of feedback from folks in the wildlife rehabilitator community. I think that they're kind of an underappreciated resource that not everyone gets to. You're usually only interacting with a wildlife rehabilitator if something's gone sideways in your day. And also they're all volunteers and they do work that I think a lot of folks intuitively would think like, hey, I got an injured bird here. I'm going to call the state wildlife agency. That's not something that we normally do is like look at individual animals and try to like rehabilitate sick and injured wildlife. But there are a network of folks out there doing that. So that's something it was exciting to hear from them. Obviously, they have a special set of concerns. Another great example of a project that's going on is um, I also work a little bit with the Farmington Land Trust in central Connecticut, and they have developed over the past few years um, an educational program that um, gets all of the second graders from the surrounding public school districts to come to their property to do a whole integrated unit on pollinators, and it's also integrated in with the school district's curriculum as well. So stuff like that it's really cool. It's outside of the box, and it's going to make a difference down the road. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Look, someone just put one. I think this might be our last question from Aaron in the chat. Wondering how many conservation areas are using some type of controlled burning to enhance habitat and biodiversity.
Great question. We do some controlled burning as the state on a few of our wildlife management areas. I think notably we do some in Madianic Wildlife Management Area in Windsor and Suffield Wildlife Management Area. A lot of times, what the goal of that is to sort of to keep that sort of plant succession from happening. So you're trying to make sure that grasslands stay grassland and they'll kind of grow in and become shrubby. Um, and these are sort of mimicking natural processes that go on. I want to say there might be in any given year maybe 3 or 4 controlled burns that we do across the state. Whether there's other groups doing controlled burns too, that I don't know. So I can't really speak to all of that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, well, Brian, thank you again so much. This was a really great presentation. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else on the call did too. We will be sending an email out to everyone with the slides and a lot of the materials that Brian mentioned, some relevant links. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week and a great rest of your year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.